Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the Word, where we discuss Jesus, His church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. My name is Craig Allison.
My name is Brandon Bonner.
And we'll be your host. So Brandon said, we've been sitting here talking probably for the last half hour, going back and forth. We're getting into some episodes now that do have some duplicity. Duplicity is not the right word. There's some overlap here, and so we're getting into some topics that are probably going to be. I don't know that we're exactly on the same page. I think we're close, but I think that a lot of Christians are going to have some uncomfortable feelings here, certainly with the stance that I take. And so what this is basically we're going to be looking at the entertainment sector of our society. And basically the question here is, can Christians enjoy secular music, movies, and art? And that was one episode. And then our next episode really was, we were going to be looking at, what is the line there? And so I think what we're going to try to do, Brandon, here is to kind of merge these two together since there's so much overlap, and see what happens. So I'm going to let you kind of set this up or set the stage for our discussion and say whatever it is you want to say. And then I'll probably going to fly in and, create havoc and chaos, because that's what I do.
No, I think the first question we have to ask ourselves is does this matter, or why does this matter?
Yes.
Before we get into the question of where's that line. And so, I think it's easy to take the stance of it's just music, or it's just a movie, or it's just a TV show, or art, or whatever it might be, and kind of dismiss some of these issues. And so I think that's the first question that we have to ask ourselves and answer. So I'll pass that to you. What are your thoughts? Does this matter, or why does it matter?
Well, I think it matters because if we're presenting a picture to the world that we're Christians, we're automatically saying that we are choosing to set ourselves apart. That yes, we understand that we live in this world, but as you were talking about earlier, and I think you're going to get into this a little bit more, Romans 12, about being not being conformed to the world. So we already have this thing about being set apart. But if the world is looking at us and they see us participating in all these activities and going, spending money for different concerts or venues or shows or television programs or movies, and it's nothing that they wouldn't do or would do. I mean, it's basically the same thing that they're doing. Then, yeah, I think what is the message that we're sending? It's like as Christians, we kind of do all the stuff that you do and consume the same amount of stuff that you do. And I think, to my point earlier, I was just talking about, I think there's a line that we draw. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be vague with that line. And so I'll talk a little bit more. I will go out on a limb and specifically mention some shows that I know are going to be like, people are going to be like, wait, what? So I think here is, all right, so how do we do this, or how do I present this information that doesn't sound pharisaical or legalistic or hypocritical or any of that kind of stuff? So to answer your question, I went all the way around the moon to do it, but it matters.
Yeah, and I think Romans 12:2 is a great example of why. Paul opens up this chapter here and says, do not be conformed to this world, and kind of indicating being conformed is something that's passive. It's something that happens to us. We're in this world. There are influences around us. Without a doubt, they are going to influence us. And so Paul's saying, hey, be aware of this. So don't be conformed to it. However, be transformed by the renewal of your mind and spirit. And, he's kind of taking this passive verb and putting it into an action verb of something that you have to make the cognitive decision that I'm going to not be conformed to this world, and I'm going to be transformed because I am made new in Christ. And so I think that is a big reason why this matters. We are influenced by the things that are around us, whether it be media whether it be entertainment, whether it be friends, family, whatever it might be. The things that are around us do influence us, and it's important for us to be aware of it.
And that transformation process that's the sticky part. That's the part that is hard. That's where we have to look at this from an objective standpoint and go, I'm going to have to make some hard decisions about what my habits are, the types of things that I spend money on. And are people going to look at you and go, what, like, why? What's going on? And it's going to be some awkward stuff. But the more I think about this, the more I focused on this, the more what's the word I'm looking for? We're convicted. The more convicted I get about the stuff that I personally consume, and asking myself those tough questions: is this something that I need to be giving my time and attention to?
Yep. Well, and I think what's interesting, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, but the Greek word that Paul's using here for transformed is metamorpho.
Mm-hmm. So where we get the metamorphosis.
Yep. So, and it's the same verb that's used in the Transfiguration in Matthew. It's a significant change, not a micro adjustment.
Yep.
And this change and this transformation of your mind and spirit allow you to be able to discern what is good. Right, and that's what Paul's saying here. You, through this transformation process, you're able to begin to kind of strengthen that discernment muscle of is this God's will? Is this good or is this bad? And so I think it's good that we're having this conversation today.
There's and back this up just a little bit, because I want to make sure that the listeners understand this. When he talks about don't be conformed to this world, when you think about what it means to be conformed, you think about clay, a mold being pressed in, it matches the example that's been set. And so as Christians, we are not supposed to be molded to what the world looks like. So if you can't discern what you're doing from the person that you work with, you guys are all doing the same habits, the same hobbies, the same interest, everything looks exactly the same. I hate to tell you this, you're conformed to the world. You're allowing the world to saturate you. I think if you take a dry sponge and throw it into water, what's going to happen?
Absorb all the water.
It's going to absorb all the water. And as Christians, we need to be thinking about it in terms of, I don't want to be a sponge. I want to be something that does not absorb water. I can still be in that world trying to influence it, but I'm not going to take on the characteristics of the world.
Yep. And he says here that through testing, you'll begin to exercise discernment.
Yeah. So I want to get into some specifics then, because I know I'm throwing us both under the bus. we have in past episodes been kind of vague about specifically, drawing lines and stuff. And so I want to do that. I want to challenge people to think about this. And if you want to push back on me, you can.
Kurt's been waiting for this one.
I want to poke you a little bit. So we're going to talk a little bit about entertainment, for example, because that's a big piece of this. This is like, well, what does this actually have to do with it? Like, how do I actually apply this? And I'm going to say that entertainment is not neutral. And that's what we want to do a lot of times, is play this neutral ground. We're like, well, I'm a mature Christian. I can discern. I can weed stuff out where I need to weed stuff out. Yes, I may watch this television program, or I may go to this movie, and there's some stuff in there that's clearly questionable. But I'm not a child. I can discern it. I can filter things out and that kind of thing. So here's my pushback to that. Is if you know that you're going to a movie or you're watching a show and you're aware that there are things in that movie or in that show or going to a concert or whatever that are going to be misaligned with your Christian values, why are you spending money on it in the first place? Like, what's the point? Like, how do we rationalize that? That's the question, and that's the hard thing. That's the work I'm talking about. From being conformed to being transformed. Mm-hmm. It's hard work.
Yep. And
so we have to begin asking ourselves those tough questions.
Yep.
So, are we consuming content, or does it continually to quietly or sometimes overtly shape us? And so where does that line start then?
Yeah, I mean, I think that first thing, and we've talked about this on previous episodes, is we have become over time desensitized to some of this content. I mean, some of the shows that are out there and content that's out there right now would not have even been a thought in mainstream media, however long ago. I don't know. I'm not that old, but like when you were growing up,
I think you've probably seen it even in your lifetime. The changes that have taken place on what was appropriate versus inappropriate, and what's appropriate now.
Sure. And so, I think that's one thing for us to notice is that conviction or that line of, oh, maybe I shouldn't be watching this, has, I think, moved a lot over the past however many years. And so we've kind of repeatedly exposed to things that are contrary to what Scripture says. And so I think that that's where we should start. What does that line look like? Where do we draw that line? How do we draw that line? And why should we draw it? And so you have examples of shows.
I do. I'm going to say them too.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I've put down here, I think these are clear examples where the line is definitely being crossed. I don't think you can make any solid argument for saying, yes, Craig, I think as a Christian, I can justify spending money and spending time on these types of things. So there's a show called Euphoria on HBO, Game of Thrones, movies like The Wolf of Wall Street. And you can go Google this stuff and see, to what nature the explicit sexual content is, what the language looks like, what's being glorified or honored in these shows. And it is so anti-Christian in every way that it's not fathomable to me to how a Christian can say, yeah, I can justify watching that show. I think that absolutely crosses the line. And if you do defend that, I think that's a sign of just how conformed you might be to this world and the battle, the internal struggle that's taking place. And those are just a few examples of shows that I think clearly cross the line.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be honest, Greg. This is something I struggle with. But the question of, and we talked about it earlier, if you have to defend this, why would you have to defend these things? Like, these are shows that have, maybe explicit sexuality or, moral excess or sin or whatever it might be. And so putting yourself in the position of you defending that, it's difficult to defend as a Christian. So yeah, I mean, that's, thinking about Ephesians 5:11, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. Hebrews 3:13.
Instead do what?
Instead of expose them.
Instead, you expose them, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be having a voice about this and talking about it.
Yep. And leading into Hebrews 3:13, exhort one another so that you won't become hardened by the lies of your sin. So from that angle, even in our discussion earlier and right now, it is provoking a lot of thought of, what maybe we should be harder on ourselves as Christians. And we know there's a ton of things in Scripture that's going to step on our own toes. And we like to avoid those things because it's not a good feeling, but this is maybe a really relevant topic.
Well, and I said before, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody else, is like we want what we want. Like we're going to do the things that we want to do because we like them. And you made the comments like, these shows are extremely entertaining, highly addictive, and they're made that way. And you have to, just stop and pull back and ask that question. Why is that? I mean, are we so naive that we think that Satan is completely removed from this world and he doesn't influence the entertainment culture, knowing that it's going to tempt and pull Christians away and pull their minds away and influence the way that they think about things? He absolutely is. And so I think part of this discussion is hopefully not only for you and I to challenge you and I individually, but anybody listening to this is take a look at your viewing habits, where you spend your money, your entertainment, because I think it's not going to be easy. Again, not to keep going back to this, but the transformation process is hugely painful. It's hard. It's weeding out. I like the way C.S. Lewis put it one time. As children, you have a toothache, and you lack the spiritual wisdom to understand. This is the analogy he uses. A child's not going to want to go to the dentist to get that tooth pulled because it's going to be painful. But he doesn't understand that in the long run, that's a much better thing for him to yank out that thing that's causing the rot, the decay. But the parent looks at that and understands that's what's going to be best for the child, so they do that. Are we not children in this scenario where we're fighting and screaming to keep the rot inside of our head, not realizing the damage it's going to cause? So I think that's where I'm at on this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that the more you consume some of this stuff, it can the line of what's morally upright, where our identity is, good versus evil, that line starts to blur. And I think that that's, something else I haven't really thought of, like how much entertainment can really influence us and our thoughts and the way that we, approach our day-to-day lives, because these are things, like you mentioned, I mean, these are things that are designed for you to love and to enjoy and watch. If they weren't designed that way, then it wouldn't be an issue at all.
What was the story you were telling me about? Was it a Navy SEAL or something?
Yeah, so I read a book recently, and it's called It Takes What It Takes, and it's not a spiritual book, but there's some good insights. It's written by a guy that was a mental conditioning coach for high-level professional athletes. And we're talking like NFL players, baseball players, highly competitive football teams. And his approach is he's kind of coined it. I mean, he didn't come up with it, but the way of neutral thinking. So to be able to get your mind in a spot where you're neutrally approaching issues, you're not overly optimistic or you're not overly pessimistic about things. And thinking about it from kind of the professional athlete lens, quarterback goes out there, throws an interception, runs back for a touchdown. If you go in a neutral headspace, you can ruin the rest of the game. So you have to maintain a level of being neutral. And, for us in our day-to-day lives, the same true things are going to happen and come up. So we have to maintain a level, something that grounds us. In our case, it's scripture, but he uses an example. He's going through a tough time in his life, and he reached out to a good friend of his that was a Navy SEAL, and he said in the SEALs, they test a lot of the training. I mean, that's kind of the point. And he's like, this is a good time to test your training, see if it works. So he took that information, decided to start consuming a ton of sad stuff. I think he was going through a divorce, but a ton of sad stuff. So sad country music about breaking up, sad movies about, relationships not working out, just constant consumption. From the time he woke up to the time he went to bed, played music while he slept. I mean, just went to an extreme and kind of monitored and took notes of his progress over, a 60, 90-day period, whatever it was. And it was pretty revealing. Like, it was super detrimental to his mental state, like to the point of he broke down in tears and had to reach out to help from friends because he was in just such a depressive state. And the point of doing that exercise was to prove to him, but also to prove to his, clients, these professional athletes, that this has a significant impact. So you tying all that back into what we're talking about today, the things that we decide to consume, music, movies, TV shows, what we decide to read, whatever it is, it definitely has an impact on us. And he writes in the book, this wasn't like a immediate impact. The next day he wasn't in this deep depressive state, but
right.
Over the span of 30, 60, 90 days, he got into a really, really dark spot. And
I don't think that we realize what's actually taking place in our lives from a cultural standpoint. The things we consume, how we go back 10 years ago, and there's things that would have really kind of shook us if we could have fast forwarded 10 years and seen ourselves sitting down, bowl of popcorn, getting ready, getting excited, and you're going to binge watch 5 or 6 episodes of this show, and you got to sneak peek that show as yourself 10 years before, and you're watching, and what would you say to yourself? You're like, dude, like, what are you doing? How are you watching that show? That's not who you are. That just shows, this slow drift, and it's satanically designed. I'm going to stand by that over and over again. I don't think that our media, the stuff that that it's just accidental technology that we have, and it's a good thing. I think that it's actually stuff that Satan uses to pull us further and further and further away until we don't even recognize that we've been so, instead of transformed to the good, transformed to the bad, transformed into the world, and there's no discernible difference between a Christian and somebody that is completely without a moral compass whatsoever.
Yeah, and I've even seen this in my own life. When I became a Christian, the music, especially that I consumed, stayed the same for a while, and my vocabulary as a young Christian wasn't the best. And I can't remember who told me this, but someone said, think about what you're listening to. So I just decided to stop listening to music altogether. And it really did change the way that I spoke. Like the words that I chose to use as a daily part of my vocabulary was completely different. And that was kind of an eye-opening thing for me because, I didn't make a conscious decision. I mean, I knew I was trying to not use choice words, but the only thing I did really was change what I was listening to.
And no Christian wants to say that they're influenced like that. Like, I mean, I think everybody's like, yeah, I can listen to that stuff and it's not going to impact me. Like, nobody actually thinks that they're going to be influenced by it, and that's the big lie. It's like, but we all are. Like, nobody escapes that. The more you listen, the more you consume stuff, the more that filters into you and becomes kind of your part of your DNA, part of your structure. And it's so subtle that we don't see ourselves changing, but it's happening. And we need to wake up to that and be very, I guess, vigilant that we are just as prone to getting pulled away as anybody else in that.
Well, I mean, we're designed to mimic. Like, humans have a tendency to see something and want to mimic it and replicate it. And that's kind of an animal behavior. Like, if you look at, there's been studies on chimpanzees that, same thing. They like to mimic each other. There was a study done, and I can't remember if it's an exact study, you might know because of your psychology background, but, chimp learns how to open a container, I think a nut, more effectively in one group, and they put the chimpanzee in this other group, and this other group was opening it in more inefficient way, not as effective. Took him twice as long, and he started mimicking the less efficient way.
Yeah,
because we're wired just to want to conform and fit in. And so this is, I think, the same thing. You continue to watch something, you're going to want to conform, fit in, and next thing you know, you're steered away.
Yep. Okay. So what do we do with this then? I think that it's fine for us to sit here and talk about this, but what does tomorrow look like? If you're listening, what does tomorrow look like? You may be in the middle of a season of some shows like Euphoria or something else, and maybe you're feeling that gut feeling. It's like, I haven't really thought about that before. What do you do? What's the takeaway here? Well, let me just wrap up this season and then I'll be done. I gotta see how this ends, right? Or do we just sever ties? Do we just rip that Band-Aid off and be done with it? What do you think? What's the solution there?
I mean, that's a good question. I think my gut reaction and maybe it's not, I don't think it's the right answer, but my gut reaction is like, well, discernment is important, right? These shows are kind of gray. You could go either way, or entertainment could be either way. So it's just up to me personally, which really that's just me justifying it as I'll be fine. This is something I'm doing my own time, and it's not going to affect me. Yep. But the reality is, it does affect us. And so I think at the bare minimum, awareness is important. I've talked a lot about, at the student center and in a variety of different places, that your own perception, like being self-aware, is super important in your faith walk. And this is no different. Having self-awareness and really thinking about what you're doing, what you're consuming, how it's impacting you is very important.
So here, I'm going to say this, and I hope that it resonates with people. So if your conscience has been convicted, like you look at this, and if you're being completely 100% honest, you know that you're not inviting Jesus to sit down with you and watch the show because it would be mortifying. You'd be embarrassed by it. Okay, so there's your answer right there. Like, should I have been watching the show? If you're not going to have Jesus sitting there beside you, and you feel good that he's going to approve of the language that's being used, the scenes that are being so if you know that that's going to be an issue, there's your answer. If you start to defend that, if you try to justify, if you start saying, yes, I can discern this and it's going to be okay, understand that that level of defense is exactly what an addict does. Exactly. And so there's concern there, because this may have gone beyond just poor discernment and you not thinking the situation through, what you're allowing as a Christian into your mind. But now you may have crossed over into something that you don't even realize you're addicted, and that's a problem too. And I'll take it one step further, Brandon. I'll go as far as to say that if there's any show or activity that you just focus on so much, and you've got to be in that certain place at that certain time, and you're not missing that show, you are not going to not see that movie, whatever it is. I had here as an example, The Chosen. And I have seen, I can't remember the actor's name that plays Jesus, Rami, or anyway, like, people are worshiping this guy. He's an actor. And people will binge watch. They will spend hours and hours and hours. It's a great show. I haven't seen all of the seasons and all of the episodes. I've seen a handful of them. Remarkably well done. It's a biblical show. It's about Jesus. But I'll go so far as to say is if that entertainment venue is something that has you so engrossed in, that's also a problem. It's like, why don't you back up from that and actually go to the actual word, open up the Bible, or better yet, go talk to somebody about Jesus. Go talk to somebody about, the hope that is within you. So there's that balance, that scale there that I think we need to be very cognizant and aware of.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And maybe the biggest issue, aside, or at least from my perspective, when you think about what's the line on entertainment, it's more of where are we committing our time and how are we spending our time? What's feeding our appetite? Do we have a hunger for God? Do we want to get to know him more intimately? Do we want to share who he is? Or do we want to watch television? I think it's super, super difficult to work a full day or have kids a full day, and at the end of the day be like, okay, and I'm going to sit down and open up my Bible versus I'm going to sit down on the couch and relax and watch TV.
Yeah.
It's kind of been, entertainment's kind of been a form of relaxation.
It is for me. I watch a ton of movies. I'm like a movie connoisseur, aficionado.
Craig has this massive TV in his sitting room, and I can see his sitting room. We're neighbors. I can see his sitting room from our house, and I can just see the light flashing in there.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things that I have to consider is like, yes, it does help me relax. A lot of that too has to do with, and some people may think, oh, there you go defending, your actions or whatever. But to have, I have some ear things that I put in at the end of the day because my brain is fried because of the tinnitus. Some people call it tinnitus. So I have constant ringing in my ears. And so certain shows I watch and music that I'll listen to or stuff that helps that out. But what I've been doing here over the past couple weeks, I go into that room and I turn on the TV and put the headphones in, but I'm not watching it. I'm listening to because it drowns out that buzzing noise. And I'm sitting there on my laptop and I'm doing something that is edifying for the kingdom. God has blessed me with the ability to write, and so I'm challenging and I'm channeling, focusing more on those talents and because I've gotten away from that, and so I'm really trying to use those talents. So there's things there that we can be doing that are going to be more edifying to ourselves, to our mind. And so that's the challenge to me, to you, and to anybody listening to this is to challenge yourself on this topic specifically. Anything to add?
No, I think a great episode, great discussion. As always, if this was challenging to you, we encourage you to share it. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, all the major platforms. Also want to plug our sponsors. We have Ministry League, which I think maybe just had an app update. Parker probably will tell me later. But Ministry League is one of our sponsors. We're on there, so encourage you to check that out. Great resource. We also have our other podcast, which is After Sunday, which is a quick recap of our Sunday mornings here at Central. So yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, well, we're looking forward to next week's episode. We're going to dive similar topic, but take another little route on this. So I hope you join us for that. Until our next episode then of The Lion, the Way, and the Word, be kind to one another, love one another, and remember the Creator of the universe loves you so much that he gave up his only Son for you. Have a blessed day.